Up next, we have Mr. Mekbib Gemeda, who's Assistant Dean of Diversity Affairs and Community Health at NYU School of Medicine in New York City, and he's going to talk about what are secondary applications. So without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Mekbib Gemeda.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's really great to be here at AMSA ARC, and I've been coming here for a couple of years, and I really find the energy and commitment that these students show amazing, and it's really energizing to be here and see so many people, so many students involved in pursuing medicine and in that interest, and it really shows you where our next crop is coming from, and the kind of energy that that there is among these students. So I have been asked to talk a little bit about secondaries today, and I have discussed secondaries in the past, and it's always a big question, you know, what are secondaries really? And I'm happy to talk a little bit about it. And the way I thought of presenting this is to have this PowerPoint more as a reference, and to take questions and to have, you know, more an interactive environment where I get to answer questions that are out there that are of interest to you, rather than lecturing you on what secondaries are. So first, to go for the definition, what are secondaries? So if we look at the definition of what a secondary might be, well, first it might be something that follows a primary, right? That's what it means. And the second definition may be secondary in importance, right? So it's not a primary, so maybe it's not as important. That could be a definition that we have. And I have seen that kind of comments from students who really keep asking, so does your school require secondaries? And what do secondaries really mean in the context of the application? And so it really confuses a lot of students what they're supposed to actually produce with those secondaries. And obviously the third definition is that it is supplementary. So, you know, it's secondary to some information that you have given before. So it is, you know, supplementing that. So it's kind of filling some holes that you left out in the primary application. So that said, what is it for? You know, so that's the question that comes next. And so the question would be, why do schools want your secondaries submitted? So, so first of all, it's they want to know first whether you're really interested in the school, right? Because especially with AMCAS, you have a situation where you can easily apply to many schools with just a click, right? And so therefore, schools want to know whether that click was really a very genuine click, or you were just, you know, filling the list of applications that you wanted to, you know, schools that you wanted to apply to. That is the first aspect of why students want to kind of engage you and see whether you're truly interested in them. The second one is they want to get specific information about you. So they have, you know, in that sense, some control then over the information you provide, because in your primary application, you know, obviously they are interested in how you did with your GPA and your grades, what courses you took, what your MCAT score was, what experiences you had in terms of both community service and research. And then you go into your essay, and you're free to say anything you want, right? So, you know, you actually compose that essay by yourself, and you shape it in much, you know, in an independent way. So what the secondaries provide the schools is to actually ask for specific questions that they would like to know about you. So that gives them that opportunity. And then, obviously related to that is, they want to see, what your strengths are, and some of the questions are framed in that way. They want to know what your weaknesses are. And then they also would allow you, the other side of it is, they would allow you to address some issues that you might not have addressed in your primary application. So, some of the questions might be, have you had, academic difficulties at one point or another? And so do you want to explain how, why that happened, or how you resolved those issues? They would also want to see, whether you spent time out of school, whether, before college or after college or during college, and what issues were involved around that. So these are some of the things that that schools want to know. So now, if we want to get into the first question, which is, why are you interested in us? That's the big question that schools would ask. And in a way that would tell them more, that would help them filter out the students that are, truly interested in them, from those that just, clicked, and that was how they were there, And so you have to be, and this is, an advice to you, you have to be very careful in answering that question, because you want to be, on one side, you want to be genuine and truthful, right? On the other side, you want to show some enthusiasm, right? And then obviously, when you're applying to an average of 11 schools, you probably, your interest in every school is not at the same level. But you have to show the enthusiasm so that the schools would know that you're truly interested in them. So my advice, and the way you're going to show this, is that the first thing you want to explore what makes the school unique, and that is a very difficult question, and those are questions actually even when you have the dean's panel of several schools sitting together. It's a very hard thing to talk about. What is like so different about you from another school? But there are differences, and there are differences that should matter to you as a student and a trainee, and the amount of time and energy you spend in exploring them and emphasizing those unique differences would mean a lot in your secondary, because the schools would recognize that you have taken the time and energy to look at some specific things about the school that are not readily available, for example. And so that is a very important aspect for you to look at, what are the unique features of the school. And then you should also talk about several different features of the school. So looking at the location, the clinical research, and various opportunities that it has, and or the dual degree opportunities, for example, that the school has. But very importantly, the most important thing about your secondaries that I see is that you have to kind of relate it to your own goals, and those are the things that are that secondaries are most important for, is they're drilling deeper to see how well formed your decision is to pursue medicine, and how it is how it is shaped, how you have integrated all the things that you have done, the experiential, the academic, and so on, to get there. So relating those things of like how the school's various opportunities that the school provides relates to your specific goal is very important. And then lastly, as everywhere, being wordy and using using cliches is something to avoid in every way, and the secondaries are not an exception. You have to be able to do that. And then the second aspect of it is really, what is so special about you? That's the question. And so people want to know what features you can talk about that that distinguish you, that make you different. And that could mean, again, experiences that you have had, travel you have had, work you have engaged in, sports, art, all of those different aspects of experience that might distinguish you. And then again, personal challenges that you have overcome would also be a very important aspect. Again, you can talk about things that have shaped you, and that is, a very important thing. How were you shaped? And so how your background, the early education you have had, the quality or the lack of that you have had to overcome, socioeconomic status, culture, race, sexual orientation, all of these things, really are give some meaning to who you are, and to you need to share those things. If they're not, again, repetition and duplication is not a great thing, so what the secondaries are supposed to be are, for you to talk about things that you haven't really talked about or emphasized in your other part of your application. But whatever, stands out and you want to emphasize, this is the place to talk about. Best attributes that you have, like that is, again, what we talked about. And you need to reflect well on the unique experiences and how they have, so just not to say what they are, but how they relate to your goals and to who you are now and to who you want to be in 10 years from now. So those are very important things. Again, do not be wordy and do not be philosophical, because that is one thing that we see quite a bit in both the essay and the secondaries, is people really using lots of words and getting into philosophical aspects where it's not needed, where actually what you want to say can be said in a few words, concisely and in a better way. So those are the things that you want to really be careful about. Your strengths, challenges that you have gone through, a very important aspect of secondaries, and moral and ethical dilemmas. Some schools would ask you that kind of a question, that adverse situations that you have gone through, and that really helps them see what kind of a professional you might be as a physician. So those are like some schools that really want to drill deeper and see what kind of true challenges you have had in life. And again, as I mentioned a little earlier in the panel, we usually don't see those things very easily. We tend to not to see some of the things that we have experienced, because we look for dramatic cliches in general, but while we have actually gone through life in many ways, through many things, and we have had relationships that we can talk about and that have truly shaped us in actuality. So really, this has to be a reflective process where you really look deep and examine your life. I mean, that is the whole purpose of this. Leadership and problem solving. Again, that is the thing that they would like to see addressed in your secondaries. And again, leadership and problem solving is, you would always think of what you have done in college, right? But there might be things that you have done in 6th grade or 5th grade or 7th grade that you would not think about. So, you should think about those things very carefully, because reflection is a very important aspect of a physician, and a reflective physician is really what schools are trying to train, and showing that you can actually observe and reflect upon your experience and actions in the past tells them, like in a way that you're going to be a very good communicator, and you're going to observe and reflect on the patient's situation in a much better way. So I think it's very important to show that. Weaknesses. this is, another aspect of, the things that people want to look at, your vulnerabilities. And in some of the questions that I have seen, actually, they don't want you to talk about your strengths and weaknesses at the same time. Because usually what happens when you're asked to talk about weaknesses is you start the weakness and then you turn it into a strength and say, oh, this is actually my strength because I did this about it. But your vulnerabilities are an important aspect of you. And if you truly understand them and if you observe them in the right way, then they tell us how strong you are. How strong you are in observing and analyzing and reflecting upon your weakness. And that gives you an opportunity to see how the student or the physician, as a physician, would be able to identify with a patient. So, you do not actually approach always from a position of strength. You understand from a position of vulnerability. And so those are, very important aspects that the schools would like to see. Relationships in your life that have best prepared you for wherever you're going, where you're planning to go. And those are, very important things. Again, it's very important to reflect and see who influenced you in your life, and not to go on the cliched aspect of, looking at, oh, the physician that you shadowed, or the researcher that mentored you, but rather, like to see who truly in your life shaped you. And that is a very important aspect that we kind of do not see very well. Professionalism is another aspect. And so what would you like best about being a physician, and what would you like least? Those are, questions that they would ask you. They're tough questions because you have to be honest in answering them, and students would tend not to answer those kind of questions because you would think that they would make you vulnerable in terms of how they would be interpreted. But that is the challenge, right? That you are able to look at, what is the problem of being a physician, and what are, the advantages, what are the things that you like. Healthcare reform. Someone asked that question today at the panel, whether, issues of policy are discussed during interviews, and generally that is not the case. People tend not to talk about global policy aspects of healthcare, so they don't put you at a spot where you can talk in any different way about your policy viewpoints that may not be the same as the interviewer, right? But this is a very valid question, whether what you think about the current healthcare reform and how that may affect or influence your career choice. So that is, a very, I think it's a very good question, and so you should think about those things, and what that would show the schools is that you are engaged in thinking broadly about careers, about the workforce, about health, about public health in general, and those are good aspects that you want to see. Again, your career in 10 years, that is a question that I think everybody asks practically, and that does not mean your career in 10 years, whether you're going to be an orthopedic surgeon or a pediatrician. That's not expected of you to know, at this stage. But it is expected that you have an idea of in what kind of health environment you would like to serve. Do you want to serve in an academic center, for example, where you're going to be able to teach and do research and so on? Do you want to work in a private clinic? Do you want to work in an underserved area? Do you want to work in a rural area or in an urban area? Do you want to work globally? All of those things are important, but they should, again, relate to your overall application. And again, I emphasize that you really should bring together all your application in a way that it could be understood, like within one context. Moral and ethical dilemmas. That's again, a professional question that they would ask you. Altruism. What is altruism, and how have you engaged in it? And these are, in short, some of the things that I wanted to emphasize before getting to the questions. And I will open the session to questions now.
Mr. Gemeda, a student who's watching through our live broadcast has a question through Twitter, and the student is wondering how she can, what is the value of discussing some abroad experience, study abroad, and is it appropriate to discuss that in the secondary application, and what approach might the student take who wants to talk about experiences working abroad or studying abroad, and relate it to some of the some of the aspects of the secondary application that schools are looking for, like strengths, weaknesses, individual aspects or characteristics.
Yeah. So if the experience is significant, I mean, that is the whole point of this, is that any experience that you want to discuss has to be a significant experience to you, so it's to you. And if that experience is the abroad experience was significant, and it was extensive and sustained, or in any way it had really a significant factor in shaping the student, then it can definitely be discussed, and it can be discussed in many ways. Again, depending on how that significance was exposed, in terms of perhaps finding one's difference with others, relating to others who are different. There are or conditions, not only people, but relating to different conditions. Overcoming huge challenges, so those are all could be, I'm just putting it out there. Those could be the things that made this experience significant. So whatever made the experience significant should be detailed in answering that question. But the key is that anything you want to talk about in the secondary has to be something truly significant to you, and something that you haven't really addressed in your primary application. Any other questions from the...
Another question that that students have is, what is the significance of having received a secondary? Specifically, what are the practices out there of different medical schools in sending out secondaries? Is there a pre-screening? Do some schools have a cutoff for sending out secondaries? Do other schools send out secondaries to everyone?
Yes, I mean it's different. So some schools screen before sending secondaries. Other schools do it broadly, because they want to really find out whether the students are interested in applying to them. So it is, the practice is all over the place. So, I think students should definitely filter through that on their own to a certain extent, to know what schools practice, and then whether, truly the secondary they got was from one or the other. But I really think, as I mentioned at the beginning, the primary reason for secondaries for schools is they want to know if you're really interested. So that is like that kind of covers all of them to a certain extent. Any questions from the group here? Yes.
I guess for myself, I'm experiencing an issue whereby I have a number of significant experiences, and I don't want to include all of them necessarily in my primaries.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to reserve one or a few good ones for my secondaries.
Yeah.
My problem is managing them.
Yeah.
And where do I place, which ones do I place in my primaries and which one do I place in my secondaries? And should I save one as a ace up the sleeve, or how do you work that?
Well,
Could you repeat the question, please? Could you repeat the question?
the question was that it was raised that the student has a problem of how to manage the various significant factors in his application, and whether to save some for the secondaries and use some of them in the primary essay, and how to manage them. That is, the question is, how do I manage the various significant interests? How would you call them? Interests, or yeah, that he has, that he wants to share with the schools. I really think that if you have an essay that you're putting together, your personal statement, that should have a theme and a context by itself, and so it should define what is written in it somehow. The way you have put it together, and from that you can understand what are you going to talk about in any secondary, and so that's my feeling is that your essay or personal statement has to be guided by a certain theme that you want to address about yourself, and if you're addressing that, you would have some of your interests and experiences covered within that context, and then you would have whatever it is that you want to address in your secondaries would somehow evolve from that. And again, like the other thing is, although, I mentioned repetition is not a good thing, right? And you should not repeat the things that you have said in the primary and again in your secondary, because, people then would say, why, do I have to read that again? Contextualizing and synthesizing things is an important aspect. So, because you're not far away from who you are, wherever you're talking about yourself. So things have to kind of be synthesized, and they should feel each other in some way. Your experiences and your interests and your thoughts and your feelings and your goals for the future, and all of those things have to kind of work with each other. And so in wording them, you can, within your secondary, things can come together as well. So that's what you want to emphasize on.
Just to follow up on your response to the student's question about where and when to incorporate different stories, and I understand that it's important to not tell the same, describe the same experience over and over again. But to what degree is there a benefit to telling a complete story that starts in the primary application, maybe with the personal statement, continues on and develops into the secondary application, and then reaches a conclusion in the interview? Is there a value to creating a story arc that goes across all of those elements of the application process?
Well, I mean, there is, but I'm not sure whether it goes in that sequence as such, because in a way, I think your story is, in a way, it's told and retold, in many ways. So you're really telling it once in your essay in primary. You're telling it again in your secondary, and you're telling it again in your interview, but you're not really using the same story. You're telling about yourself and shedding a little more light about yourself throughout. Some secondary, I have seen some, I think one school which actually asks you for your autobiography in your secondary. So because your essay, your personal essay does not necessarily have to be your autobiography. But specifically, they ask you for your autobiography in your secondary, so that now they can really go through your life and see, how it was shaped. But you can definitely address that throughout this, various places, as you're shedding light on yourself as you're going along, and the interview being, the final one where you actually.
Another question has come in from the Twitter feed, and it's about the optional essays that may appear in the secondary application.
Yeah.
And the student has a question of how optional are they really?
I think I think they are. Probably, I can't say because we don't have them at NYU. They're not optional, but my feeling is that they are truly optional, because there are some schools who do not need secondaries at all, and they want to ask you just specific questions, and that's all they need. They don't want another essay, another explanation of anything. They're happy with what they have, and they just want to ask you a couple of questions. They just want to ask you, okay, why are you interested in NYU? Why are you? What do you want to do with your future? As a physician. So just some specific questions, and so I don't think that optional thing is a trick. I think.
And just a quick follow-up to that, then, can you recall any specific examples from secondary applications that you've looked at outside of NYU's that have optional questions? Like what kinds of questions are optional on secondary applications?
Are you saying questions or essay as optional?
Either an essay, like what type of topic would be asked that might be an optional essay topic, or are there questions that are asked that are optional, like examples, specific examples of.
I do not know of any example of an optional question, but I think the question was if there is something for you to write an optional essay. I think that it's truly to say, well, if you think that there is something significant that you haven't really touched upon in your primary application, please go on. But it's not necessary. That's what they are saying in principle. And what we want is really to address this couple of questions that we have listed. That's the. Questions?
So you told us what to do, but what are some bad things that people do that we should not do, other than repeating ourselves again?
I would think, like the worst thing to do is, and I mentioned that, it's to be wordy. Really, 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 it's very important to have a process of writing concisely and not to go on and on, about something that you feel you want to share, right? So that is a very important aspect, and it's good to look at some books for that. I really suggest to look at Strunk and White, a very good book. It's like a tiny book, but it really helps you not only write but think. So you just get to things easier, faster, and you share it well. And so those are the things that I would say. Avoid cliches. That is, I keep saying that. It's very, very important to really avoid the noise that's out there. And the noise usually is that there's a sense that there is a way to, write an essay, to do a medical school application, and there's this noise out there, and you have to kind of get away from that. And if you want to tell a unique story, talk about yourself, and that is, that's what makes a difference. And when you see students and that apply all the way to the interview process, the best students I have seen are students almost that, in which it doesn't feel that you're interviewing them. That's how it feels. It feels that you're just meeting them and they're telling you their story. And there's almost, you feel as if there isn't, any major interest for those students to somehow sway you in any direction. They're just telling you their story and what they've done and what they've gone through and where they want to go. And it's truly, that's where you want to be.
Can you talk just a little bit about the logistics of the secondary application? When should students expect to receive secondaries? When do schools expect secondaries to be returned to them?
Yeah. The logistics are, generally I think schools send secondaries sometime in August, starting in August, probably. Some might do that earlier. I would advise you to really submit your secondaries early. Try to do it in August if possible, because what happens is that a lot of secondaries are submitted sometime in September and in October, and they really pile up, and therefore, your application might not even get to be seen for a longer time. So it is very, very good to submit your secondaries earlier. You should think about, you don't have to receive your secondaries before you think what you're going to respond in your secondaries. You can actually have a draft of what you would like to respond. So as soon as you get your secondaries, you can just submit it right away. The questions are very, practically what I mentioned here. There isn't much more than that when you see about all the schools. And so you can think of, okay, what do I want to say about when they ask me, oh, what do I want to do 10 years from now? You have to think about that. What challenges have I had in my life, that is significant? Those things you can think and really, write it down before you even receive the secondaries, so that when you get them, you're ready to submit.
A student has submitted a question on Twitter about the picture that some schools request along with the secondary.
Yeah.
What is the picture used for?
The picture is just part of the file. So, I don't know whether it's meaningful to have a picture or not, but I think some schools just want to have a picture that is associated with the file. I think that's,
Can you repeat the title of the book that you mentioned?
It's called, the title is Elements of, I forget now. It's by Strunk and White. Strunk and White.
We'll Google it and post it
Elements
to our Twitter
of
feed.
What? It's 80 years old. It's a fantastic book. It's style. Elements of Style, right? Yes, Elements of Style, Strunk and White. Thank you for that.
So for those of you following along in the webcast, that was Elements of Style by Strunk and White.
Yes.
And we'll Twitter that as well so that students can find it.
Fantastic.
Tweet it.
Good. Any more questions? I think I said it all, right? That's that.
Just, I guess, just one sort of final summary question then.
Yeah.
In the context of the primary and the interviews and the letters of recommendation, how do schools fit the secondary in with all of that information? Does the secondary assume a particular role or prominence at any point in the process, or is it just all part of the mix?
Well, the secondary is in a way part of the mix, but on the other hand, it has a place in a sequence of events as a secondary. So it kind of fills some gap in the knowledge of that the school wants about the student. So I think there is this. That's what it's supposed to represent in any case. You have a student that has applied, and then you send the secondary with some specific, and you have already reviewed the application and you know something about the student, and you ask a few more questions from the students to find out more, and then you get that information, and then you invite the student to the interview to clarify or to actually meet the more or less when you have the interview is really truly a process of getting to know the student more. So after you have looked at all this information about the student, and so there is like this sequence definitely, although it comes together, and it's meaningful in the same, you weight the same way, but it has some sequential value.
Well, I want to thank Mr. Mekbib Gemeda from the NYU School of Medicine for his presentation today and for the information that he shared on the secondary application.